And welcome back. Today is February 4th, 2021, and welcome to TMR's Master Advisor session number 24. We're going to be talking terms and conditions today, but first I have some announcements to make. I want to announce that we'll be back 2 weeks from today, our regular schedule, and for the first time since we launched this series, we'll be talking about the cruise industry. We have a great advisor lined up, Trapper Martin, and we're going to be going over how he's approaching cruise sales right now, how those conversations are going with his clients, and what he's hearing from cruise lines about this year and next. I'm truly looking forward to that, to hearing from here and to hearing from him and to hearing from all of you in the chat. So please keep an eye out for that. We're going to send the link out to register once we're done here today, and we'll also get it out on social media and in our newsletter. I also want to tease a later session. We are going to have ASTA's Zane Kirby and Acta's Wendy Paradis on the week of March 18th here. That's another session I'm very excited about. We're happy to have them on to talk about the trade and its recovery, to answer any questions from you all. So please keep an eye out for that one too. That should be coming shortly. And I also know we have a lot of new advisors. We have a lot of first timers who signed up today just because of the topic. And I want to say welcome. It's great to have you. I'm very thankful to be able to have your attention today and hopefully moving forward. After all these weeks interacting with you all, I really do believe this is the best travel advisor community out there, and we want to continue to grow it. So please subscribe to our newsletter, subscribe to our YouTube. I'm going to drop the link in the chat in a second. We host all of our videos on our YouTube, including the one from today, which will go up after we wrap up later tonight. Any kind of subscriptions to that YouTube channel, likes or comments, help us grow this community and keep the focus on you, the travel advisor, which is our mission. So please keep an eye out for that. I'm going to drop the link in the chat right now, and any interactions really does help us out. Okay. And again, if anyone wants to reach me, I am on Facebook, but my email is dmccarthy@travelmarketreport.com. If you have a concern, an idea, a news tip, anything like that, you can shoot me an email. So let's get to it today. So today I'm excited to welcome Tom Carpenter to the program. Tom is an agency owner with Huckleberry Travel. He's also an attorney in private practice with Carpenter Law Office. He started his agency after many years in the labor law industry before pursuing the travel route. He's a verified travel advisor with ASTA, and he's here to talk about why terms and conditions matter and any other questions about why that's important for travel advisors to know about. So welcome, Tom, and I'm very thankful to have you here today to talk to us.
Well, thank you. I'm I'm thrilled to participate. I'm very grateful for everything that Travel Market Report does to support travel advisors. You really are the only publication out there that's really dedicated to our issues, and especially with the Travel Maestro series, which I was really happy to be part of the legal team on that. So very happy to connect with your subscribers.
Yeah, and I'm sure one of my team members will get the link to the Travel Maestro in the chat for anyone who wants to check that out. But I want to get started because I know we had a lot of interest today about this topic, and it has become very relevant, especially in light of what's happened with COVID and things like that. So I mean, I want to kick it off just by sort of letting you introduce yourself to the people on the call. Could you talk to me a little bit about yourself and your career? How did you end up going from sort of a lawyer, an entertainment attorney, to ending up as a big voice in the travel agents community and a business owner with Huckleberry Travel?
Sure. So I've been practicing law for about 25, a little more than 25 years because I'm super old. But I really had my career as a labor and employment attorney, most recently working in the running the legal department at a couple of different entertainment industry labor unions. I worked for AFTRA, which was the television and radio union. Used to negotiate Dan Rather's union contract for him, and then I ran the legal department there. Lost a year of my life putting together the merger with the Screen Actors Guild, and worked for SAG for about 6 months as their chief labor counsel, and then went over to work on Broadway for Actors Equity, ran the legal department in the eastern third of the country there. But I just burnt out really quickly. And in the meantime, I had started a small travel agency uh, a small hosted agency. We were hosted by Uniglobe, so shout out to all my Uniglobe family, because I've seen some of you on the call or on the list. And really, I was looking for something entrepreneurial to do to really connect with something I was passionate about. I wasn't going to open up a restaurant, and so really a travel business. I've been to every continent, including Antarctica, and really wanted to just kind of see what would happen if we had this little side hustle. And then of course I got really burnt out at my job, and my travel business had taken off. And I think, like a lot of people on this call, I've just heard a lot of my clients have said to me that they thought 2020 was going to be their best year ever, and then travel ground to a halt. So I thought I had flipped the switch and that I was going to be running my travel business full time with a little small solo law practice on the side, but COVID kind of flipped the switch. And even though I thought I was going to be doing a lot of reviewing a lot of employment contracts for people, most of what I started to do was representing small travel businesses, small travel agencies, and tour operators. And there really aren't that many small business lawyers out there who represent travel industry clients and really understand the unique nature of the travel business. And so I kind of stumbled into this niche that because I do the same things that my clients do as often as we can do it these days.
Yeah.
It really turned out to be the focus of my practice now. So now I have a few hundred travel clients. So
Yeah, I mean, it is nice. I mean, when I let people sort of tell their stories in all these calls, there are a lot of second career people or side hustle people that side hustles have transformed into the main career, and I think that's great to hear. And it's great to see, and it certainly makes for a unique population of travel advisors, I think, and people who are sort of driven by their passion more than anything else.
definitely, yeah, and it really has been. One of the things that frustrated me in my law career is that I had gone from, my whole goal in representing performers and performing artists was that I really wanted to help people. And I got to the point in my career where I felt like I was doing a lot of administrative work that wasn't really making life better for anybody. I went to law school for all um, the reasons that idealistic people go to law school, and I find that actually by representing my travel clients, I'm doing more to actually help people manage legal risk in their travel businesses. So that's been really, really fulfilling. I should actually say, before we get too far into this,
Yeah.
that I do have a couple of professional responsibility disclosures that I have to make, because I'm a Boy Scout about compliance with those sorts of things. So my name's Tom Carpenter. I'm an attorney. I'm licensed in a couple of states, but I'm also licensed in federal courts, including the United States Supreme Court. The states where I'm licensed might view this as attorney advertising, so I should make that disclosure. If you need to find me, you can find me at Carpenter Law Office, 225 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007. My website is www.carpentertaylor.com, and my email address is tcarpenter@carpentertaylor.com. And by participating in this webinar, we're not creating any kind of attorney-client relationship, and prior outcomes don't guarantee future results. So if I talk about something having happened in the past, doesn't mean it's going to happen that way the next time a court looks at it. So that's that's the preliminaries.
Yeah, and then I guess, Tom, because I know we're going to get this question as we go along today. If people want to contact you, what's the best way to contact you?
The best way is by email, actually, tcarpenter@carpentertaylor.com.
Okay, well, again, I really do appreciate you having you here. I feel like we're being very professional after the notice you just said. So I appreciate that, and I think we should just get right into it, because I know a lot of people are going to have questions today. So we're going to talk about terms and conditions, and the first thing I want to ask you is why you think it's important, or why it is important for travel advisors to have a term condition outline for their business, and what could possibly go wrong if they do not have one.
Well, I think So the first thing to say is that when I do these webinars, a lot of times I'm doing a PowerPoint presentation and I have this slide. If you've seen other webinars I've done or seen them on my YouTube channel, there's this slide that I use all the time with this little dial that says risk. The travel industry is a high risk industry. If you've ever tried to get a merchant account for your business, you'll know that it's almost impossible to do that. But there are just all sorts of touch points for legal risk across the board. And one of the things that I talk to people all about is all of the things that can go sideways when you're booking travel for people, when you're handling people's payment information, when you are the middle person between the book. As a booking agent, you owe a fiduciary duty to the supplier, but as a travel advisor who's maybe taking a fee, you owe a duty of care to your client as well. And so all of that risk is kind of scary, but the good news is it can all be managed. And so there are three main things that you can do in your business to manage that legal risk. And you can't always eliminate risk, because let's face it, people can sue you for a good reason, a bad reason, or no reason at all. Doesn't mean you've done anything wrong if you're getting sued. But if you've got these three things in place, you're doing a much better job to protect your business. The first, which we're not going to really talk about today, is errors and omissions insurance. If you are a hosted agent and you don't have your own errors and omissions insurance, you should call somebody right away and put that in place, because it's critically important. The second thing is having really sound documents and policies. And by that, I mean a client agreement, a terms and conditions document, a really good credit card authorization. And the third thing is to have a really airtight workflow. And the workflow might not seem like it's a legal thing, but I'm finding myself talking to people all the time about it, how it doesn't do you any good to have these terms and conditions documents that have really solid protections for your business if your clients aren't actually signing on to it somehow, agreeing to it. And so making sure that that happens consistently is really important.
Yeah, I do want to talk about workflow too, because I think that is overlooked by a lot of advisors. And I already see some questions coming into the chat. One, I just want to let you touch on, because we don't have just exclusively Americans, is so Rose wants to know if any of this will apply to Canadians. And like you said before, you're licensed in the US, correct? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And certainly there are things. I would say that I have some colleagues in Canada that if you need a referral to a Canadian agent, I participate in the International Forum for Travel and Tourism Advocates. Some of those Canadian travel lawyers participate in the Maestro series as well. So I'm happy to make an introduction if somebody needs to talk to a Canadian lawyer.
Okay. Let's get right into, I think, terms and conditions. You laid out the 3 points, and the second one was that document. And I know it's going to be, we're not going to sort of get into step by step how to do it, but I do want to touch on the general idea of putting our terms and conditions together and what a travel advisor should look at sort of in during that process. Do you have any? What is your wisdom for that kind of thing, for that kind of process of putting one of these sheets together?
Sure thing. So there are a few different categories of provisions that I put into terms and conditions documents for people. And so, think of it as like 5 different buckets. Okay. The first bucket is advisories that you need to make to your clients, because there are all sorts of cases out there that define what the legal obligations are for a travel agent or a travel advisor. Travel advisors have been sued, and they've been sued over things like, you didn't tell me that insurance was available. You didn't tell me that I needed a visa to go to that place. You didn't tell me that the accommodations were going to be inferior, or whatever it is. And so looking at all of those things that courts have said you're required to advise your client about, a lot of the provisions, and it's the reason that the documents I draft are kind of long, but we can talk about that later. A lot of those provisions are designed to check those boxes, that your client can't say that you didn't tell me about X, Y, and Z because it's in your terms and conditions document. So that's a lot. I would say that's the bulk of what I draft. There's a second category, which are legally required disclosures. So for example, if you sell air tickets, you're required to give the hazardous materials warning and the insecticide notice. Those things are Department of Transportation regulations. And most of the time, depending on how you're selling the ticket, most of the time the airline is going to cover you on that, or the consolidator will take care of that. But just in case they don't, there are regulations that say those disclosure requirements are enforceable against travel advisors, so or ticketing agents rather. So putting that in your terms and conditions document can be a way of checking that box if something else falls by the wayside somewhere else. Third category is provisions that clarify your role as the middle person, as the booking agent, that I said earlier, you owe as a travel agent. The agent part of travel agent is that you're a booking agent for the supplier. So you owe a fiduciary duty to the supplier. But the advisor part of being a travel advisor is that you also owe a duty of care to your clients. And so making sure that your clients understand that relationship. And I think, we've probably all had the situation where we're using our client's payment information to make the payment directly with the supplier, and the client doesn't understand that. They think they're buying the trip from you, and they think that because they book travel like muggles, right? They don't know what they don't know, and they think that that you're going on the internet and searching for all these little pieces and putting it together. They've never heard of a DMC. They don't know any of that stuff, and so putting in your terms and conditions to clarify for them what your role is and what your role is not is really important.
Okay, so I want to just jump in there because I just want to let everyone know I see the questions coming in. I'm gonna try to pass along as many as possible. But I just want to ask you a quick one because this one came in and I think it's relevant. How long would a typical terms and conditions agreement or terms and conditions, how long would that cover you with a relationship with a client?
Well, so that's a good question for workflow, and I think we'll come to that in a minute.
Okay.
But let me just touch on these last two things, and I'll be quick about it because I know people have lots of questions. But in terms of the last two categories, the one is a disclaimer of liability, and to make sure that your clients understand that you are not responsible for anything that your suppliers do that could lead to some sort of a lawsuit or get you sued. And so, if you've got the example that I use all the time with clients, so I'm going to have to stop using it and find a different one, is if you've got a client that's on a tour and the tour guide says, where's the restroom's just down that path. It's a short, easy walk. Your elderly client gets lost in the woods, breaks his leg, comes back and sues everybody. Well, you're not responsible for the bad advice that tour guide gave because you don't employ the tour guide. You're not the tour operator. But even go so far as to if your suppliers have policies your clients don't like, or if your supplier declares bankruptcy, you're not responsible for those supplier bankruptcies. You're not responsible for the future travel credit instead of a refund policy. So you can put that in your terms and conditions to take yourself out of liability for there. And the very last thing of the 5 buckets is force majeure language, which we've all come to learn about if we didn't know about it before because of the pandemic, but language that just makes it clear that if there's something that is unforeseen, unpredictable, outside of your control, outside of anyone's control, hurricanes, fires, floods, pandemics, quarantines, that those types of things will relieve you of your contractual obligations to your clients, but also that your suppliers are going to have their own force majeure policies, so that if there is a so-called act of God, that your suppliers are that your client understands that your suppliers have those policies. So that's what I cover in a terms and conditions document when I draft them. And that's the whole, it's soup to nuts, but it really does touch every single point of liability that you could be facing, with one or two exceptions that you can pick up in the workflow.
And I'm also curious, again, I see the questions coming in, but I'm curious, what's the process for you as the lawyer or the attorney when you handle this kind of stuff for clients? Again, is Is that the only thing you're doing for a lot of these clients, or do they have you? Do they have a longer relationship with you for you to do other things, stuff like that?
It, it really depends. I mean, every business is different. So I don't sell a thumb drive with terms and conditions on it because I think every business is different.
Yeah.
And if you're booking a lot of adventure travel, you don't need the same. You might need slightly different provisions than somebody who books a lot of school groups. If you plan travel for people with special needs and disabilities, you might need a different language than somebody who does a lot of hosted and escorted groups. So it really is it really is different. So my process with clients is I always offer a complimentary consultation. I'm part of the ASTA attorney referral program. Um, so there's a discount off of my hourly rate. I do terms and conditions on a flat rate basis because I know people don't have a lot of money to throw at these things. That can keep the costs down. And so basically I do a complimentary consultation to find out about your business. If you want to hire me, I'll send you a letter of engagement saying that you're hiring me. Um, and then a lot of times from those terms and conditions documents, I've got a questionnaire that I send out, and that gets me started on a first draft. We go over the whole document point by point to make sure that there's nothing in there that doesn't work for you. We talk about the workflow issues. So all of that is pretty easy to do because I do so many of them that I can be pretty efficient with it. But a lot of times people do come to me for other things after I've done their terms and conditions. So maybe they're hiring independent contractors. They need an agreement for a sub-agent. Maybe they need a joint marketing agreement if they're partnering with a Pied Piper on a group. So those things I'm more than happy to help. Most of those other website privacy policies, I do those. I can crank those out really quickly as long as you don't have a lot of questions about it. If you know how your website works, it's a lot faster. But I do all those other things too. But really, terms and conditions are kind of the centerpiece of most of what I've been doing for people.
Okay, so I want to ask you about, and we have a poll question just went up. I want to ask you about COVID quickly, but first, we had two questions in the chat, and I don't know if you could address these quickly, but it was about the relationship between an advisor and the host agency when it came to terms and conditions. Someone in the chat wants to know, can they use their host terms and conditions, or do they need their own? And along those same lines, someone wants to know, if you are under a host agency using their IATA, but you have your own branding, should you use the host agency's terms and conditions, or again, do you need your own?
Well, I mean, it really depends on what host agency you're with and what they're providing you. I think that if you've got your own business and your business is an independent contractor of a host agency, you're probably going to want to have your own terms and conditions document. And I'm not the only lawyer who drafts these. There are other lawyers. There's the ASTA attorney referral program, where you can find lawyers who do that work. But like I said, I've got hundreds of clients across the country that have hired me to do these things for them. I do them pretty quickly. There are also templates that are out there that you can find on the internet. The one thing I would say is if you're just going to pull something down off of the internet to use that's kind of out of the box, that's plug and play, or if you bought a thumb drive from an attorney who's sold you these templates, just make sure that you read over those documents really, really carefully and that you know exactly what's in them, because some of those templates that are out there have intentional typos in them. Like there'll be a 0 instead of a capital O, or an L instead of a 1. And the reason I think that some people put those templates on the internet is so that they can Google the mistake and then find out who's using their thing without actually reading it. So that's a buyer beware kind of thing.
So just quickly, two things for everyone in the chat. This session is being recorded. It will be on our training page at travelmarkreport.com and on our YouTube page at youtube.com/travelmarkreport. Also, I'm going to ask someone from my team to drop the link to the ASTA attorney referral program in the chat, just so everyone has that on hand. But I do want to keep going because I'm hoping to cover as much ground as we can today. I want to ask you whether or not advisors should have a specific waiver to deal with COVID-19 with their clients. Is that something you would recommend to them, especially now when people are getting comfortable traveling?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like So Mark Pestronk, who writes the legal column for Travel Weekly, did a piece on this a while back, and his view, I share his view, which is that if you've got really well-crafted terms and conditions, you don't necessarily need a COVID specific waiver. And that's because all of the things that are going to be in that waiver are going to be in your terms and conditions in a much more comprehensive, broader way. So things like advising your clients that they might need a vaccination in order to travel and they should consult with their healthcare practitioner. That's something I put in terms and conditions, advising them of the risks when they travel and directing them to neutral sources of information so that they can get the information from the CDC or the State Department. And so my terms and conditions don't just cover COVID, because last year it was COVID, well, it's still COVID, but last year was COVID, the year before that it was Zika, the year before that it was something else, and who knows what the next thing is going to be, right? So not just COVID, Zika, not just diseases, not just Australian wildfires, terror attacks, civil unrest, the grounding of the 737 MAX. I mean, all of these different things where something can go sideways. And if you've got a comprehensive terms and conditions document, it's going to cover everything, including the next thing that challenges the industry that we don't even know about yet.
Yeah, you mentioning all those, I guess, acts of God. It's you kind of realize COVID. COVID's the major one and probably the most devastating one this industry's had. But a lot of things can go wrong, and a lot of things can happen that are out of our control. So again, I see the questions. We're going to be talking about. I want to get into workflow now, though, because I know that's what's important. I know there's questions coming in that, and I know this conversation is going to answer a lot of the questions. So we spoke earlier in the week, Tom, about using workflow, which would involve getting your clients to agree to your terms and conditions. I know having a solid terms and conditions document is one thing, but you mentioned earlier in the week that doesn't do a whole lot of good if you don't get your clients to agree to it. So I'm wondering if you talk about that. What is your workflow? And what tips would you have for advisors who are looking to improve upon their end to make sure they're covered on the terms and conditions side?
Right. So I'm not going to say that there's a right way. I'm not going to say there's no wrong way to do it, because there is a wrong way to do it, which is you don't do it at all. But the way I do it in my travel business, and we do it consistently, and I have sub-agents in my business, and they do it the same way I do it, so that we're all doing it the same way, the same time, all the time. So my standard workflow is I will have a client call me and call me about a trip. I set up the phone call and I do an initial intake call. And I know we talked about this before, Dan, so I don't know if you want to just pretend like you're a client calling me. I'll run through my spiel that I give to a new client, which if it's helpful to people. So
yeah, let's do it. Yeah,
so
so
I'll say thanks, Dan, for reaching out to me. I'd love to hear about your trip. Where do you want to go? What are you interested in?
yeah, I would love to take my family to Iceland for a trip next summer.
That's great. I love Iceland. I was there a few years ago, and it was a super hot destination. But so let's talk about Iceland. How many people are going? How? So this is where I would just ask the questions to qualify the client. Everybody knows how to do that. How many people? What are your dates? What's your budget? Let's just say that I've done all that. So then I would say, so Dan, I don't know if you've ever worked with a travel advisor before, but have you planned a trip with somebody else before?
I haven't planned a trip with a travel advisor before. I wanted to plan this trip for the travel advisors because my last ones didn't go as well as I would hope they would have gone.
Great. Well, that's great, because that's kind of what we do. The core of our business is we really want to take care of our clients. Travel's really complicated now. So maybe it just makes sense for me to talk a little bit about how we've worked with our clients. We're a small independent travel business, but we are part of a couple of different networks. We're part of Uniglobe, which is our network of independent advisors, and we all connect with each other. We use our collective leverage to get preferred pricing and added amenities for our clients. We also are part of the Virtuoso network, so that gives us an even broader range of suppliers where we've got relationships that we can tap into if we need to address something for you while you're traveling. And we also invest in some technologies. We've got an itinerary planning app so that you can get your itinerary on a smartphone or a mobile device. And we make a lot of those investments, and that's one of the reasons why we do charge a fee. Our fee structure is pretty nominal in relation to the budget we were just talking about. It's really just a flat fee per itinerary based on the length of the trip. So our fee is a flat fee of $150 for a trip that's a week or less. And if it's more than a week, a flat fee of $250. Doesn't matter how many people are going there. If it's one itinerary, it's just one flat fee. We have a satisfaction guarantee. So if you think that we don't do a good job planning your trip, we will happily refund your planning fee, and we'll still administer the trip for you. And that fee really does cover all of the things aside from just making the booking, because we're not just a booking engine. We really want to take care of you before, during, and after your trip. So those are all the things that we do for people. And if that works for you, what I can do is I can send you my new client information form. Has all of the information that I need to make a booking profile for you: name, address, date of birth, email, phone number. And then at the bottom of that form, there's just going to be a short little client agreement for you to sign that just says that you're hiring me to plan your trip, and that you agree to my terms and conditions. The second one is that you understand my fee structure that I just described to you, and that you're okay with that. And then the third one is that you understand that we always recommend travel insurance, and that we're going to be sending you a quote for travel insurance once we find a trip that works for you. So if that all works, then we'll get it going. So that's my whole spiel. And what I do there, a couple of things. One is I tell them about my fee, and I attach my fee to my value proposition as a travel advisor, because that way they understand that I'm not Expedia, I'm not Travelocity, I'm going to take care of them. And it makes them understand that they're actually getting something for that fee. It's not just that they have to pay me money for something they could do themselves. And so the second thing is I tell them about travel insurance as part of the first conversation I have with them, because that's obviously, insurance is a big place where you can eliminate risk if you've started pushing the insurance initially. And let's face it, the commissions aren't bad either. And then the other thing is I've told them that they're gonna be hiring me to plan a trip and agreeing to my terms and conditions. So when they get that form, the form is just all the information I need to, I use TravelJoy, I know a lot of people do, but if you use Test, if you use Dubsado, if you use Vacation CRM, any program that you use, you can build a form like that. You can also do it you can build a Google form if you don't want to pay for something. And then I upload my terms and conditions to my website on a page that is not linked to anything else on my website. And the reason I do that is because if somebody goes to my website to see if they want to pick up the phone and call me, like if they're just trying to figure out what I'm about, I'd rather not have them see 7 pages of legal language on that website. So if you've got the ability to do that because you've got a custom website, you can do it that way. You can upload it to a Google Drive up to the cloud, give them a link to the document. But basically, when they check that box on my form saying that they're hiring me and that they agree to my terms and conditions, which are located at www.huckleberrytravel.com/ where I have it. When they check that box and return the form to me, whether or not they go to my website and read the terms and conditions, checking a box and returning a form is a perfectly valid way to create an agreement between you. And if you've got a record of that agreement in TravelJoy in a response to your Google form, those things are always going to, you can take your document to a judge, show the document to the judge, show the judge that your client agreed to it, and the court should enforce that as a legally binding agreement.
Yeah, we had a bunch of questions about that specifically before you answered it, actually, about do you need an actual signature on the terms and conditions, or is acknowledging it that they're available, they're readily available, is that enough? You don't actually, is it so you don't actually need to get their signature on the bottom of the copy of the terms and conditions?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of depends on it sort of depends on what your terms and conditions say, because you do need a signature if there's an actual waiver in your terms and conditions, or if like for a credit card authorization, I think you should have a signature there. TravelJoy, which I use, has a signature, an e-signature function with credit
Yeah.
card authorizations. And that's actually my backup, because I think I saw one of the questions pop up that what if they haven't agreed to your terms and conditions in a while? Do you have to do it for every trip? What I do is I put it in my new client information form, and then I also put it on my credit card authorization. So the credit card authorization says, I'm hiring you, I authorize you to charge my card ending in 4567 in the amount of $1,250, comma, and I agree to your booking terms and conditions, which are located at URL address. And so that way they're agreeing to my terms and conditions. Again, when they put a deposit down for a trip, when they put down a final payment on a trip. And so it really does make sure that, you know, if you've got a repeat client who hasn't booked with you in a while, maybe you've made some changes to your terms and conditions, they're agreeing to it again. I do think it's valuable to get it at the very front end of the client relationship, because there might be things in your terms and conditions like the right to correct a quote. And that obviously is going to happen before your client makes a payment on a trip. And so by putting it into the new client agreement, you're getting them to agree to your terms and conditions right at the front end of the relationship. You get the full benefit of all those protections, and then they're agreeing to it again every time they make a payment when they give you credit card authorization.
So again, we have a ton of questions coming in.
Okay.
One I want to bring up, which you might have just answered it, but I do want to ask because I think it's a good question. What about an advisor who hasn't had terms and conditions before, and now maybe through this webinar they realize they need it? They have a lot of long-term clients. This question is, how do I explain that I now need them to agree to this, and does it and again, we already talked about, does it need to be signed or acknowledged?
Right.
But I mean, what are those conversations like? Do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, I think, so I know a lot of people struggle with this. And in fact, I had one client say to me that she was really worried about having this long document with all this legal language when she'd worked with her clients for 30 years, and how was she going to do this? She actually showed the terms and conditions to one of her best clients, who was also a friend, and said, what would you think if I asked you to agree to this? And she was being much more in your face about presenting the terms and conditions than I am.
Okay.
My methodology, the benefit of doing it the way I do, I think the benefit is that I'm not rubbing my client's nose in a bunch of legal language. They're checking a box and returning a form. And think about all the times that you've downloaded software and you haven't gone through that whole thing that Microsoft pops up. You click I agree, you're creating a binding agreement with Microsoft or Apple or whoever. So that's the way I do it. But in terms of my client who shared it with her best client and said, what would you think? Her client said, well, I would think you were running a serious business and that you were not just some sort of fly-by-night joke. And so, that's a perspective that, people, especially if you've got corporate clients, they're used to agreeing to things. They understand that those things happen. And frankly, if your client is going to balk at paying your fee, if your client's going to balk at signing your terms and conditions, then better to find that out 15 minutes into a phone conversation than after you've done a bunch of work for them and you're suddenly realizing that they're expecting you to just, eat the cost of their trip if they decide not to go at the last minute or something stupid like that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's the same. I mean, we've had this sort of discussion, not for terms and conditions, for a lot of things, a lot of extra steps, a lot of extra fees. And we've had advisors sort of walk us through their conversations to get their clients to do something extra or to pay an extra fee or things like that. I saw another question about, like, if I hear one person who says, a newbie group that I work with, they can't afford a CRM yet. I guess they're looking for options to have clients sign documents electronically. You mentioned Google Docs. I think Google Docs is free. And I think there's a bunch of electronic document companies now, especially with COVID, like Teledoc and DocuSign and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I use, like I said, I use TravelJoy because it's really not that expensive, but of course, what's not expensive to me might be a heavy lift for somebody else. I just think, you can cobble together something from what's out there that's free. And then for your credit card authorizations, DocuSign, Cognito forms, there are some reasonably priced things. I think it kind of saves me. I think it saves money to make a small investment in a tool that's going to give you one place where you can do all of that stuff. I think it just makes it more complicated to have to go to a Google form for this and a DocuSign for that and Adobe signature for this. It feels to me like it's a lot easier to do it all in one place. But that having been said, I just saw something popped up about client base. I have to invoice things to my host agency through client base. And oh, by the way, this is for Summer, who I saw was on the call. This is Cooper, who wants to participate in the webinar. Sorry about that. He just jumped into my lap. Like it just feels like I lost my train of thought because of my bull.
Oh no, I mean I want to get to three things before we end the call, and we're scheduled to end in about 18 minutes. So I want to ask you, we've had some questions in the chat about how does an advisor's terms and conditions relate to the supplier's terms and conditions? Is there a relationship between those two? I mean, would your thought be that advisors can't think that they're covered just because their client is seeing a supplier's terms and conditions, and they still need to make sure they're covered by having their own available?
Yeah, so one of the duties that you have, and this is one duty that you can't actually take care of in a terms and conditions document, you have a legal obligation to disclose the identity of the supplier to your client. And a lot of new agents really feel like they hesitate to do that, either because they don't want their clients shopping around for a better deal, or because they feel like they're giving up ownership of they don't seem like they're in charge, and they don't have a lot of credibility if they let people know that they've gone someplace else, to a wholesaler or a tour operator. But legally, you're obligated to tell your clients who the supplier is. And I recommend, and I put in the terms and conditions, that not only that your clients understand that you're not the supplier, that you're the booking agent for the supplier, but that the supplier is going to have their own terms and conditions. And in addition to agreeing to your terms and conditions, the client needs to understand that they're also going to have to agree to the supplier's terms and conditions. So that's in all of the documents that that I draft. And then usually if I've got a client who, or if I've got a supplier, maybe it's a DMC in another country, and like the document that they put together, they do a great job putting together trips, but the document has there's English is not their first language. There are syntax and grammar issues in there. And I feel like I need to clean it up, put it into Travify or UMapped in order to send a slick copy to my client. I always find somewhere along the line to either attach the original thing as an attachment or to link to the supplier's terms and conditions, so that my client can't say that they didn't get the terms from Vacation Express or FunJet or whoever it is.
So I want to ask, I see the questions coming in. I know I know people are asking about chargebacks, and I'm going to save that. But as part of your workflow, Tom, you mentioned talking about your fees, and I'm wondering, I mean, as sort of advisors continue to adopt fees and becomes more of a regular thing in the industry, does taking a fee from a client make you have different obligations for the client? And is that a good thing to know as a part of your workflow?
Yeah, so those court cases that I was mentioning earlier, where courts found that you have an obligation to your clients as well as an obligation to the supplier, those apply whether or not you charge a fee. Being concerned about taking on additional liability because you're taking on a fee, that's not you still have those obligations anyway. You might as well get paid for all the work you do. That's my perspective on it. I don't think you're stepping into any more liability in a high risk industry. There are some things with seller of travel laws. If you're in, if you're a hosted agent and you're in, and you're taking fees from people in California, you should have a conversation with your host about that, because seller of travel laws come into play there. But generally speaking, there's no reason not to charge a fee, and you can manage any risk that attaches to that by having a good solid client agreement and a good solid terms and conditions document.
And so now I want to ask, what I just mentioned was chargebacks. That's another big thing that sort of popped up during COVID, as people were struggling to get refunds and decided to sort of take the matters into their own hands through their credit card companies. Is that something you ever consider when you're writing terms and conditions for agencies? And is that something people can protect themselves against through terms and conditions?
Right. And I do put a provision. I've started putting, I was just having a conversation with a client about this by over email earlier today. So I have started putting language into my terms and conditions documents that say that the client agrees that unless it's a case of fraud, that they are agreeing that they won't submit a dispute with their credit card. Obviously, you can't stop a client from disputing a fraudulent charge. And then there's also the Fair Credit Billing Act that comes into play, where if they don't get something that they paid for within 60 days, they have a legal right to dispute the charge. But that having been said, most people don't initiate that dispute within the 60 days of the time the charge goes through. So if you've got a client that, maybe they're upset that they're getting a future travel credit rather than a refund, and they say to you, look, I'm just gonna dispute that charge with my card. Well, if you're in a situation where that could come back to you in the form of a debit memo, or the supplier is going to take that out of your pocket, you can say to the client, look, I understand why you're upset and frustrated, but actually in my client agreement, maybe you didn't realize this, but you've agreed that you're not going to initiate a dispute like that unless it's a case of fraud. This isn't a case of fraud. You actually authorize that charge. So can we at least have a conversation about whether there's another way to solve the problem you're having? And so that it can be a way to open up a conversation with your client. It's not necessarily going to help you with the supplier or with the credit card company. In that case, you're really going to want to have a solid credit card authorization. That's going to be your best friend for something like that. But if worst case scenario, your client does dispute the charge, and that does wind up coming out of your pocket, you could take your terms and conditions to a judge along with the evidence that your client agreed to your terms and conditions. Say to the judge, Your Honor, my client agreed in my terms and conditions that they weren't going to submit a chargeback. They initiated a dispute with their credit card in violation of my agreement. I was damaged to the tune of $20,000 of the amount of the disputed charge, and I'm owed attorney's fees, blah, 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 blah. So hopefully, it will never come to that for people. And, those of you who are hosted agents probably have a host agency that's going to go to bat for you in a situation like that. Last thing to say about chargebacks, there's a video on my YouTube channel which specifically talks about, we had a chargeback situation in my agency, and so that prompted me to record something really quickly just to say how we dealt with it. So far, I think it's under control, but we'll see.
Yeah. So if you guys want to, if you need more information on chargebacks, definitely, do you have a name for your YouTube channel, Tom, or is it if they just get into YouTube and go to
I
Tom?
think if you just Google Carpenter Travel Law, you should probably be able to find it.
Yeah, when we upload the video to Travel Market Report, youtube.com/Travel Market Report, I'm going to drop the link to that video in the description. So head there later today or tomorrow morning to check it out. So there's one more thing. So we had a few questions in the chat asking about what's it going to cost them to talk to an attorney, whether it's you or whether it's somebody else connected through ASTA to build the terms and conditions sheet. I know you probably can't get super specific, but I mean, what's the typical cost of this, or a ballpark figure that they can expect when they pick up the phone and get some quotes?
Yeah, so I always do a complimentary consultation with people for 15 minutes. That's part of the ASTA attorney referral program. And the ASTA attorney referral program also, you get a 15% discount off of my hourly rates. I also give a discount to ASTA members for flat fee things that I do. Because webinars tend to live on, and I don't know what my pricing is going to be at the time somebody looks at this. But what I've said to other people is, we're not talking about in the thousands of dollars. We're talking about in the hundreds of dollars. Okay. So it doesn't have to be ridiculously expensive. And again, if you're not a member of ASTA, I'm a huge supporter of ASTA. They've been doing such important work during this whole crisis for us. And if you're not yet a member, it's worth it to join, because it's the amount that you save if you hire me to do a terms and conditions document for you is going to be more or less what you'd be paying to join ASTA. So it'll be a wash, and then you'll get all those other extra ASTA benefits, which are so great.
Yeah, and we have a few people. We have a past guest, Carrie Dyer, shouting out ASTA in the chat, and Rick Artis, who's a big part of ASTA too. So shout out to everyone. Shout out to ASTA. Again, we're gonna have Zane on here in March, so keep a lookout for that. I want to ask one more quick question, and then I'm gonna wrap it up. If anyone has dire questions, please drop them in the chat, and we'll see if we can fit them in. But we only have about 9 minutes. What about, so we talked about terms and conditions. We talked about the signatures and sending them out and things like that. I'm wondering, I mean, do you have any advice on storing the terms and conditions or keeping them together, like, or making sure you have them on file? Any advice for travel agents who really haven't done this kind of thing before?
So, so I think I mentioned I put mine on it's a public facing page on my website, but it's not linked to anything on my website. So you're not going to find it by clicking around. And again, that's just because I would rather not have somebody decide not to pick up the phone to call me because they didn't understand something they saw on my website. So my website, they don't get access to my terms and conditions until they've checked a box that they're hiring me to plan a trip, or at least that I've had a conversation with them where I've sent them that.
I guess my question, Tom, is how do you record that the terms and conditions have been agreed to, or how do you keep track of
Oh, I'm sorry, I got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, I've got, I do that in TravelJoy. TravelJoy gives me a record of everybody who submitted the form and checked the box. But the same thing with, if you're using something free like Google, if you set a Google form, you can go back in and see everybody who's ever filled out that form. I think it's date stamped. I think Google Forms are date stamped or time stamped, but you can add that in there. It's pretty easy to do. So.
Yeah. So again, if anyone has any more questions, please get them in. But Tom, I did want to ask you something that's not super related to the topic. Just because you have a background, you with your career, you have your ability to do a lot of things, and I know a lot of people are not in your situation. But I want to ask you sort of about where you see the future of the industry in the short term, and what are your feelings coming out of COVID as an agency owner and a lawyer who deals a lot with the travel industry? I mean, I basically want to ask you, how bullish are you on the travel industry? And I mean, how do you see the industry moving forward out of COVID?
Yeah. I mean, I just learned about this thing called optimism bias, where, people are naturally inclined to think that things are going to get better, even when they're pretty bad. So I just found that out, heard about that term. So, it made me question myself. Am I really having optimism bias? And I've decided that I don't, because I think the travel industry is going to come back strong. A couple of things about it. One is that I will say that I think that the challenges that we've had in the past year, that those of us who stick it out and who are really treating our businesses like their businesses and not just like their hobbies, I think that this is going to be a really good thing for the industry going forward, because consumers are starting to realize that just because they can book something on the internet doesn't mean that that's actually the best way to book travel, and that having somebody who can keep track of all of the entry protocols and quarantine requirements and testing requirements and health passports and all of that stuff. Travel's super complicated right now. And I've had people reaching out to me in my travel business as bookings start to slowly trickle in, who never would have used a travel advisor before. And now they're calling us and they understand our value proposition in a really, really different way, because, like my clients, I'm still doing battle with Virgin Australia about a refund because they suck, but but other than that, like, none of my clients had to spend a minute on hold with a supplier because I did that for them. And I I was going to say gladly, but not really. I mean, I did it because, like, that's my job, right? It's my job to make sure that my clients are taken care of. And so now that people understand that, I think that those of us who make it through are going to be in a really, really good position going forward. And also, frankly, there's such a low bar to entry in this industry. Anybody can go to a multi-level marketing scam and say that they're a travel advisor. And I think if the ASTA figure really shocked me, that there are something like, I don't know what they said, 70% of businesses aren't going to make it through. I'm kind of okay with that, because frankly, a lot of those people weren't running serious businesses in the first place. And those of us who are on this call, who are all like concerned enough about the issue that you bother to like give up an hour of your day to find out whether there's something you could be doing to protect your business, that's, we're going to be the survivors. So, Thunderdome. Uh,
Well, I want to say again, thank you a lot, Tom. This was a lot of information you gave out for free today. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today and to answer all these questions. Again, I know a lot of people are asking about the video. Travel Marker, youtube.com/travel market report or travelmarketreport.com. I'm going to put Tom's link to his terms of his chargeback video in the description, so look out for that. And I hope to see you all back here in a couple of weeks to talk about the cruise industry. But again, thank you again, Tom, and hopefully we'll get you back on here. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot more questions that hopefully you can answer.
It's absolutely my pleasure, and like all of the names that I saw in the chat who are friends of mine and clients of mine, just thanks. I'm very, very grateful for your support. And those of you who I don't know, I'm more than happy to chat with any of you. If you need me, I'm a phone call or an email away, and happy to talk to you.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and have fun watching the Super Bowl in the States.